these truths to be self-evident.
That all men are created equal.
As a member of Congress, I get to have a lot of really interesting people in the office, experts on what they're talking about.
This is the podcast
for insights into the issues.
China, bioterrorism, Medicare for all, in-depth discussions.
Breaking it down into simple terms. We hold
these truths.
With Dan Crenshaw.
The Eagle has landed.
So last week, House Republicans voted to pass the Protection of Women and Girls in Sports Act, legislation that would bar biological males from competing in women's sports. This should have been a pretty common sense bill supported overwhelmingly by anyone who understands basic biological differences between men and women, but not a single Democrat voted for the bill. The debate surrounding transgenders has reached a pretty pivotal point, and many are beginning to wake up to the left's war on reality and truth. Today, we're going to talk about some uncomfortable truths that up until a few years ago were widely regarded as indisputable and based in scientific fact. That's the idea that men and women are different, that men should not be accessing women's bathrooms and locker rooms just because they want to call themselves women. The idea that men have certain physical advantages over women underscores the importance of sex-separate sports leagues. The idea that we can't throw away everything we know to be true just because a loud minority are trying to change the narrative and shift perceptions on biological realities. And our guest today is one of these strong female voices speaking out against the attack on women's sports. And she's had some interesting firsthand experience dealing with it all. So today we're talking to Riley Gaines. She's a 12-time All-American swimmer with 5 SEC titles. Was a successful female swimmer at University of Kentucky. She had ambitions to pursue a dental degree. That postgraduate ambition in her entire life was changed when she was forced to share a locker room and then compete against biological male Lia Thomas at the 2022 NCAA Women's Swimming Championship. Now, Riley actually tied with Lia for 5th place. NCAA officials insisted on only giving Lia Thomas the trophy solely for the purpose of fitting their pro-transgender narrative in a photo op. And most recently, Riley was physically attacked at a college in California, had to be escorted by law enforcement to safety, all for simply daring to share her story. So, Riley, thanks so much for being on. Love to talk to you about all this.
Of course. Thank you so much for the awesome intro.
So maybe let's go to your background. Like, how did you? So you grew up in Nashville. We were just talking about that. When did you start competing in swimming?
So I started swimming when I was 4. By the time that was just your typical summer swim. A lot of kids do. But then by the time I was 8, so in 2nd grade, that's when I decided that I would do this year round. So this means that in 2nd grade, you're swimming 2 hours every single day of the week. And from there, it really only gets harder because by the time you get to middle school, high school, you're practicing before school, you go to school, you go right back to practice after school. You eat your dinner, you do your homework, you ice your shoulders, go to bed, wake up, do it all again the next day. So it's impossible to put into words the amount of time and sacrifices and dedication that it takes to compete at that elite level. It's a lifelong journey.
It's a lot. I mean, I never swam competitively. I was in the SEAL teams, so we swim a lot.
Oh yeah.
But nothing like what you guys do. I mean, how many yards will you do in a single practice? It's a lot.
Yeah. So at the collegiate level, in a single practice, we would do somewhere around 7 grand, 75. And then of course you come back and you do it again at night. So we're swimming around 15,000 yards a day. Okay. Which a mile is 1,500. So it's about a little under probably 10 miles a day of swimming.
That's wild. Back and forth in the pool. Back and forth. Do you,
Yeah.
I hate pool swimming. But do you guys ever, do you prefer like open water swimming at all? Is that something you ever got into?
So I did some open water, and really how I got kind of thrusted into open water swimming is over COVID when we all got sent home. It was my sophomore year. It was 3 days before we were supposed to leave for NCAA championships in March, which would have been the end of our season. I say end, there's never really an end, but that would have been the end of our collegiate season. But again, 3 days before, the U.S. essentially shut down. And so we all got sent home, which in swimming, you never get sent home. We're there all summer, all Christmas, all Thanksgiving. You don't get a break. And so when we got sent home, I, of course, at first was like, oh my gosh, this is awesome, for about 2 days until I realized, okay, we're eventually going to have to come back. And so all pools were shut down, all gyms were shut down. And so I'm fortunate I'm from Tennessee where there are an abundance of lakes. And so every day I put on a wetsuit and swam aimlessly in the lake. And so that's when I really started doing some open water swim. And then when I graduated college, I started doing some triathlons and some more open water swimming. So I found to enjoy that a little bit, but you're right. It's all boring, right?
Well, I love open water swimming, but I also have an irrational fear of sharks.
Totally.
It's all I can think about. It's just the jaws just coming up from beneath.
Totally.
Like in the SEAL teams, it was different because we would always, at least in training, you're always swimming in large groups. So you're like, the danger is diffused between me and all the other guys, and there's great whites out there.
Totally.
So it's just, it just ruins the experience because it's all I think about. Even in the lake, it's highly irrational. I can't help it.
I swam across many snakes in my time over COVID, so I understand.
Oh yeah. Or are they like deadly ones? Will they mess with you?
Yeah, we have some water moccasins, and those are not.
That's not good. You don't want to be
those
bit
are
by
not
that.
good. Yeah, no. So we definitely have some not good ones here.
That's not good ones. All right. So you're still are you still competing, or is it more for fun?
More for fun. Doing, like I said, some triathlons. I just ran in the Nashville Marathon this past weekend. So just trying to find different ways to still compete because it's such a big part of me is you have this competitive drive to win, to achieve, to set goals. And so I'm trying to find more ways to continue doing that.
Well, good for you. It's good for, I think it's good for just your mental health, honestly. Exercise, just competing, like seeking out that next challenge. As you just graduated from University of Kentucky.
Correct.
Okay. And you're back in Nashville. All right. Well, let's get into this experience. I mean, so recently there was a bunch of headlines because you were telling your story, and I want to get into the details of the actual story. Like I breezed over it in the intro. But I actually kind of want to understand what was it at Stanford?
I was at San Francisco State University.
Okay, San Francisco State. Gotcha. And have you been doing these kind of speaking engagements? Or is this the first one? Have you been doing them regularly, or how did this even come up?
Yeah, so I've been doing these, going to colleges, talking to different groups, whether that be Turning Point or whether that be Young Americans for Freedom, whatever group that might be, and really engaging the youth. I think it's so important for my generation. I am 23. I just turned 23 like yesterday, so I feel I'm used to
happy birthday.
Thank you. But engaging college age kids to really have this perspective and this ability to have their eyes opened and their minds changed, because what we're seeing so often now among administrations and universities and institutions is places that are supposed to be where you can engage and have open dialogue, that's being taken away. And so I'm trying to encourage people my age to see the harm in allowing men into women's sports and women's spaces.
Because it's really hard to see the harm. It's like it's like a real complicated subject. I obviously say that pretty sarcastically. So, but how was the reception? Like, so how was the initial talk? Like, was the reception? Were they open to that? How many people showed up? Like, paint a picture for us.
Yeah. So I knew going to San Francisco. Well, I thought I knew what I was getting myself into going to San Francisco. Obviously, the demographic and the environment here probably isn't going to be receptive as it is for me in Tennessee, where I'm from. And I knew this, but this almost excites me, not because I'm looking for controversy or looking for arguments, but because I can sit in front of people who don't agree with me. It's not as if I'm preaching to the choir in a sense. And so I knew there was going to be a sit-in where people had orchestrated. They had this big event, a counter protest to me being there, where they had this big event where they were going to make signs and walk over and sit in the room. And so the maximum capacity in the room was, I think, 80. And that filled up within a minute. I mean, probably 50-50 supporters versus protesters in the room. And so I was able to give my speech. I probably talked for 45 minutes and then did a question and answer where I answered all of the questions in opposition. Again, able to have that dialogue. And it was relatively civil. I mean, there was some heckling, but for the most part, it was respectful. It was engaging.
That's good.
But it was only after the speech where during the speech, I could hear people outside the building, and they were chanting things such as trans women are women and all the things. And of course, that's their right to protest. I'm not one to that stuff doesn't bother me. But as I was continuing on with the speech, I could hear the chants getting closer and closer. And close to the end of the speech, I could hear on the hallway outside of the room, on one end of the hallway, one side was yelling, trans rights are under attack. And then the other side of the hallway would yell back. They would say, what do? We fight back. And so it was a bit unnerving just hearing how close they were. But again, protesting, the right to organize doesn't bother me. But it was after I finished my speech when these protesters who were outside the room, they stormed in, they turned the lights off. This is when they rushed to the front of the room and assaulted myself and others.
Wow.
An officer stepped in and grabbed me, which I want to mention. I was supposed to meet the officers an hour and a half before the event, the campus police officers, but they never showed up to kind of go over an exit strategy. And so this lady grabs me. I had no idea who she was. She was not in uniform. She had her face covered by a mask, nothing indicating she was an officer, but she grabs me and says, come with me, I'm an officer. And I didn't believe her at the time because why would I? But I really had no choice. And so she led me out of the room, to which we were only met with more protesters in the hallway. We couldn't even get down the stairs. They were filled. So that's ultimately when we had to go into a separate classroom building along that hallway, where I was barricaded in for 3 hours, over 3 hours. I missed my flight back home because we couldn't leave. These protesters, they demanded I pay them money if I wanted to make it home safely, to which the dean of students was actually negotiating with them.
What the hell?
I know. They were.
This is a crime. What you're describing is a criminal act. You could easily describe it as kidnapping.
Absolutely.
Intimidation, harassment, assault, and
totally.
San Francisco's not going to do anything about it because it's San Francisco.
Right. But I think it's so ironic because after the event, the university released a statement saying they were so proud of their brave students for being so peaceful in this protest. And they know how hard it can be to listen to someone who is spreading so much violence, such as myself. And here's some counseling.
They used the word violence.
They did. Yes.
The school did. So the official school statement used the word violence to describe what you were talking about.
I believe so. And then afterwards, the student organization released a statement. And I'm certain they used the word violence. They said Riley Gaines spreads violence, which is just so silly because the only thing, let me reiterate, what I was here to talk about was my experience competing against a male, and how that affected myself, how that affected my teammates, what the locker room looked like, and the silencing piece that we're dealing with, and explaining how men and women are different. And this isn't an argument rooted in transphobia or hate. It's just about fairness. And these people, they can't grasp that.
Yeah, trying to get inside their heads on this is a tough one. And I do want to get into that with you because, you're just younger than me. So, you've just had these experiences in college. I don't know how the University of Kentucky sees it. But all universities are dealing with this where you've got kids that are they're brainwashed. In a really severe way. I went to a really liberal school and this wasn't a thing. Honestly, politics wasn't as in your face, even in that really liberal school, the way it is now, let alone this weird ideologies that are infecting everybody. But one thing I wanted to ask you too. So what was that environment like in Kentucky? Why are you the only one we're seeing speak out about this? How do your teammates feel? Is it across the board, or are there teammates you have who are like, no, we should let them? And I don't know.
So of the 40 girls on University of Kentucky swim team, 38 feel the exact same way I do. My coach feels the exact same way I do. My athletic director, who is a phenomenal guy, really after all of this happened, at the very beginning stages of this, when no one had been necessarily outspoken, I called my athletic director and I said, this is what our NCAA championships looked like. This is how we felt. Are you okay if I take a public stance? And he just responded back with, Riley, I love you. He said, I would support you on whatever stance you took. He said, don't worry about painting this university in a bad light. Speak your heart and stay true to your convictions. And I thought nothing of it at the time because I thought that's how any athletic director would talk to their student athlete. But oh my gosh, I could not have been more wrong about that assumption. And so I so value University of Kentucky. I think it speaks volumes about the school, especially the athletic department. I think it speaks volumes about the Southeastern Conference in general. So my experience with my coaches and my athletic director were very unique, to say the least.
Okay, and you're just going to have to excuse my ignorance on how all this works. So Lia Thomas, the male, I'm going to refer to him as just, whatever. I don't care. The left hates me already, but I'm just for clarification purposes, I'm going to refer to him as that because I think this conversation gets very confusing otherwise. So he's at Kentucky. He's a male at Kentucky,
Pennsylvania.
Okay, sorry. Okay, so he got it. He's at Pennsylvania, and then you guys are competing in NCAA championships. What year is this?
2022.
Okay, got it. And on the locker room. So do you ever have to share a locker room with him? Like, how does that work?
We did. We had no idea that we would be sharing a locker room, and I can't even accurately explain with words the betrayal that felt like. To be in a locker room, which, let's be totally frank, a swimming locker room is not a place of modesty anyways.
No, I've seen those guys in their water polo outfits. I mean, my goodness, there's a lot of SEALs who are, jeez.
Exactly. So it's not a place of modesty. And so in locker rooms, they're just not comfortable in general, even if it is all of the same sex sharing space.
No, absolutely not.
Growing up a swimmer, you almost feel comfortable being vulnerable in that environment.
Yeah.
But I can't even tell you the inherent subconscious need to cover yourself when someone of the opposite sex walks in, drops his clothes fully intact and exposing male genitalia, watching other girls undress. It felt
like you said, it's hard enough with your own. So I don't like seeing my own sex in a locker room. I can't. Right. It's hard to even imagine what you're going through at that moment. It's
absolutely. And it just felt like the people who were supposed to be protecting us and ensuring us our privacy had failed miserably. And we're doing the opposite of that. A 6'4", 22-year-old male with male parts who actually still is sexually active with women at the time was changing next to us, and no one said anything. And so again, we were not forewarned. No one asked for our consent. We did not give our consent. And so I immediately left the locker room and asked one of the officials on deck, how I understand the guidelines for the meet, which was just 1 year of hormone suppression. They didn't check levels. It was just 12 months of hormone suppression.
Okay. You answered my question. I was going to ask kind of how leading up to this, how this even happened, because I thought there were rules in place, but okay.
Right. But I asked him, what are the guidelines for the locker room? And word for word, he responded back with, oh, we actually got around this by making the locker rooms unisex. So I'm sitting there thinking, I'm like, unisex. Okay, so any man could have walked into our locker room and bare minimum, they didn't tell us. So it just felt like betrayal, belittlement. It's, of course, awkward, uncomfortable, embarrassing. And I think traumatizing is a good word for it.
And okay, so how full of shit is this guy? I mean, you're telling me that he's actively he's like dating, having sexual relationships with women at the time. It seems pretty obvious. He's obviously not going through any surgeries of any type. Maybe he's on hormone blockers. There's no actual proof of that. So was this literally just a ruse because he sucked at swimming in his own league and wanted to get into yours? I mean, if you, I don't know. I know you can't like read his mind, but I don't know if there's any evidence to suggest it. I'm just
right. Well, I don't know entirely sure, or I'm not entirely certain what the motives truly were there. But I will say this opportunity is presented to people who would do it for that purpose.
Of course.
Let's say Lia Thomas didn't. Okay, but there is some pervert who would do anything to get into a women's locker room. And if the only requirement to get into a women's locker room is to say, I'm a woman, that sounds great to some kind of rapist or pedophile or whatever that might look like, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the system that we have in place. I mean, that's what's been going on in prisons as well. I mean, all you have to do to get into a women's prison is say, I'm a woman. And just in California, in recent weeks, there was over 1,300 men applied to be women, which again, doesn't that sound wonderful to a rapist? They're getting in there, they're impregnating these women. So if nothing else, the systems we have in place are so weak and do not protect women or children by any means.
What feminist groups that would I mean, and I'm talking about your kind of typical feminist groups that would maybe be against, my politics, I'm not actually sure what your politics are, but based on kind of who you interact with, I'm kind of getting the feel for it. But let's talk about like left-wing feminist groups. Have they been supportive of you? Are they waking up to this?
It's going two ways, and those two ways, one of which these feminist groups are supporting and continuing to embrace the original feminist movement, which was to empower and recognize and honor and celebrate women based off of their own uniqueness, their own physical ceilings. But there's another variation, which is going the total opposite way and is now actively fighting for male inclusion in women's spaces and sports and shelters and all the different things. I'm sure a lot of people have seen Megan Rapinoe. Mm-hmm. She was once someone who fought relentlessly, tooth and nail, for equal pay, equal access, equal resources for women's sports. Yeah. Now she's fighting for men to take over.
Right. She's fighting against you. Like, so is she willing to compete against men? Like, has anyone asked her that point blank? I don't really follow Megan Rapinoe very often.
Right. I don't think she's explicitly said, I would compete against a male. And if you've ever seen Megan Rapinoe play, I can't help but think she would genuinely shiv someone, a male, who tried to take her position on the U.S. women's national soccer team.
As she should. As she should. But like, you can't hold these contradicting ideas in your head, and people like her clearly do, and they won't admit it. I guess my question was like, has she ever been asked that? I don't think she'll come on my podcast anytime soon, despite me being a huge soccer fan. I grew up playing soccer. That was my sport. I was never as good at it as you are at swimming. I'm definitely not even as good as swimming as you are at swimming, even being a SEAL. It was actually people think we're like the greatest swimmers ever. No, we just suffer through it. I remember on my collegiate swim, we do 2 mile ocean swims every week in buds. And they suck. I mean, because you've got a guide, you're going through the ocean. So that's there's no lanes. It does. So I'm like this the whole time. So I'm probably going 3 miles. Then there's like the guys who did collegiate swimming, and it's not even a challenge for them. It's very frustrating. The rest of us are like going through it. We're also wearing a lot of gear. It's not like your typical swim. But boy, I miss those days. I got sidetracked there. So okay. So tell me about the actual meet. What is your what is your I don't want to use the wrong term, like competition that you compete in, and Lia Thomas competed in this. How did you guys place, and what happened afterwards?
Yeah. So the first day of competition was the 500. There's a couple events, but the event Lia did was the 500 freestyle. That's not an event that I do. So the first day I got to sit on the side of the pool and watch as Lia swam to a national title that evening. I want to mention the year before, Lia Thomas was ranked 462nd at best among the men, and now winning, trailing, dominating by seconds. And a second doesn't sound like a lot.
Oh, that's a lot in swimming. Yeah.
But to beat the entire country by multiple seconds is a rarity, to say the least.
So she got first in the 500. So this is what I was confused, because I read that you guys tied for 5th, and something. I was
right. And so beat out Olympians, beat out American record holders, all that. That next day of competition was the day that Thomas and I raced in the 200 freestyle, which ultimately resulted in a tie. We went the exact same time down to the 100th of a second. I think our time was 1 minute, 43 seconds and 52 100ths or something like that. So upon tying, we get out, we go behind the awards podium where the official looks at both of us and says, great job. You guys tied, but we don't really account for ties. So Lia takes the trophy home. And
so were you tied for what? This is for so
for
how many trophies are there? There's
so top 16 become All-American.
Got it. Okay.
But top 8 are only awarded a trophy. If you finish top 8 in the country, then that's when you're named an All-American. You're marched out into the podium. And so we tied for 5th.
And you did not get a trophy.
They let me pose with one. They said you can pose with the 6th place trophy, but you will give it back and you go home empty-handed and Lia takes the trophy home. And so I, of course, questioned this. And they said, well, they weren't prepared to answer this. And so he kind of stumbled on his words and he said, well, we're just doing this in chronological order, to which I further questioned. And I said, okay, well, what are you being chronological about? And he said, well, for photo purposes, Lia has to have the trophy. You can pose with this one, but you'll give it back and you don't get one. We can eventually mail you one is what they said.
Did they?
They eventually did. I don't even think I've ever opened it. That trophy is so devalued to me now, knowing that I had to share it with a man. It means nothing. The NCAA has gone totally woke and it is wanted to reduce everything that I'd worked my entire life for down to a photo op to validate the feelings and the identity of a male at the expense of my own. And so that trophy is meaningless to me.
At any point, were you able to look at their rules and find that they'd broken their own rules? And is there a lawsuit in order?
There definitely will be lawsuits in order soon. I think securing legal funds was an important part of this process because obviously they want to burden you. They want to make it inconvenient. It's expensive. It's a lot of time investment.
Do you have a place where people can donate to your legal fund?
I actually don't, but I'm working on it. For a couple reasons. One, the NCAA, what they did was discriminate on the basis of sex, which goes against everything that Title IX was created to protect. So that is a lawsuit that is winnable. No doubt about that. And also with the San Francisco State incident, that is a lawsuit as well. And so I think securing those funds was crucial to continue moving forward with legal action. But that is in the process of being done, which is great news.
Yeah. Well, let us know when you want. I mean, a quick interview on Fox and Friends with the website up. I'm sure you'll get what you need pretty quick. So this happens. You're obviously kind of blown away. At what point do you decide, you know what, I'm going public with this? I'm also curious how there's at least one girl who would have made it into the All-Americans but did not. Is that correct?
Absolutely. I can't even share with you the amount of tears I saw from girls who placed 17th or 9th who missed out by one place. One girl in the 500, she stayed her 5th year because of COVID. We got an extra year. And so she's from Hungary. She stayed her 5th year at Virginia Tech. Her name is Reka. We were standing next to each other watching the final heats in the morning because you have to swim prelims, qualify for finals. And that's when you come back and swim at night. And so she had just swam in one of the previous heats in the morning and she wanted to know so badly if she was going to make top 16. And so I'm standing next to her. We're watching this last heat where Lia swims and dominates. And the results come up and she saw she got 17th. And she looks at me with tears in her eyes, grabs my hand and says, I just got beat by someone who didn't even have to try. And that's when my feelings shifted because this was the first day of competition. And up until this point, I felt so angry. But when Reka said that to me, and I could see how this impacted her, and I saw how heartbroken she was, that's when my feelings shifted to, I felt like I just got punched in the gut. I felt like I'd been like, it hurt me so bad to see her come to the realization that someone didn't even have to try. A man with that much advantage didn't even have to try to beat her, knowing how much work she'd put in, because I'm certain she's just like myself and trained her whole life to get there. So yes, there was lots of tears. There was lots of whispers and grumbles of anger and frustration from these girls who missed out on being named an All-American by one place.
Okay. So I want to understand, and again, like you just graduated from college. You're of that age where like, because this was not a thing for me when I was 23. Right. So I didn't have to deal with this. What do you your average college kid, I mean, how do they think about this stuff?
In regards to the female athlete space, the people I talked to, the D1 swimmers at that meet, almost unanimously, they agree that this is so wrong. Among your typical college demographic, majority of them still think this is wrong. You have some who have never played a sport, who don't understand the value of sport, who don't care. You have some who
It's pretty hard not to understand. Like it's really difficult. Like you got to be, but
that's
okay.
what I find interesting.
They pretend not to understand. Let's say that.
That's what I find interesting, because you have someone like Katie Porter who last week came out and said that I was just doing this for clicks and likes, and I wasn't actually interested in the movement, when in reality, she's never played a sport in her life. She doesn't understand the value of it. She doesn't understand what I'm doing. Then she went on to applaud Dylan Mulvaney. And I'm like, if you're going to say he's not doing it for clicks and likes, but I am.
That's literally his job, is to do it for clicks and likes. He's an influencer.
Totally.
So it's
but the college age demographic, they will say so privately that they agree with me, but publicly they're terrified. They don't want to be labeled transphobic, a bigot, hateful. They don't want to be seen as anything other than an ally to this community. And it's because we've reached a point where if you don't agree with everything this community is putting out, bigot.
It's nuts. It's nuts because it's not even whatever the movement is. Okay, so you got to redefine movements a little bit. Again, I'm sure you have gay friends. Am I wrong?
Absolutely.
We have a lot of gay friends. The gay community doesn't like this either.
No.
They don't like this either, because I think it takes away from their message, which is, at least most of it is a very rational view of equality and equal treatment, which is also how I feel about transgender people. I mean, look, if you ask me to call you by a different name and a different gender, just out of politeness, I'm happy to do it. Like if it is just a matter of politeness. But if you try to force me to believe it, and then change standards as such, well, no, because now you're asking me to lie. Now you're asking me to say things I know are not true, and also inherently engage in what is unequal treatment. Now, this is not a hard concept to understand, and I'm really confused. What is hard for me to understand is how so many people buy into it, and I guess that's why I ask you the question: like, do so many people buy into it at the college level? Or is it these people in power who I think have a misunderstanding of basic public relations? Sometimes, like, you look at corporations who engage in this and give into this. The NCAA, you said they've gone fully woke. Well, it's like, here's a question I have for you. Are they true believers?
No.
Or are they just totally scared? Are they bad at PR? Which one is it?
They're not true believers, because I say this, and I know for certain, after all of this happened, the NCAA president, Mark Emmert, he released a statement saying he unequivocally stands in his decision to allow Lia to swim because it's based in evolving science and all of these things. And so I got nominated for NCAA Woman of the Year, which is the highest honor for any collegiate female athlete, to which Lia Thomas was also nominated. So again, the award was meaningless and devalued to me. But I went to this NCAA convention where they were going to announce the winner, and I bought a booth inside. To which, when I tried to buy the booth with my name, Riley Gaines, they denied it. And I tried again with Riley Gaines, they denied it. And then when I found an alias to buy the booth, they were like, of course, we'll take your money. But I went inside this center and I passed out pamphlets to athletic directors, basically highlighting the importance of Title IX. And every single one of them who walked by said, I agree with what you're doing. Keep fighting. We support you. And that felt great, the first 60 or so who said that. But then it was only after that continued to when I finally started asking, okay, you say you support this, but would you say so publicly? Oh, no, we don't want a lawsuit. We don't want to lose our jobs. Even the president who released that statement, who said he unequivocally stood in his decision to allow Lia to swim, he came up and said, keep fighting, keep doing what you're doing. So they have no backbone. They're spineless. They're cowards, lack leadership. They lack authenticity. And they're catering to the minority, even though they know it's wrong.
It's crazy. And so, talking on the political side, Democrats apparently are true believers, because I have to assume that based on how they're voting. The Biden administration recently announced a new Title IX rule. Now, let's keep in mind, Title IX, the entire point of Title IX was designed to create women's sports. That was the whole point, and so we're chipping away at that in very serious ways, to the benefit of mediocre male athletes, or perverts. I'm not sure. It's one of the two. Like it's totally one of the two. You're either a mediocre male athlete that can't compete in your own sport, or you're just trying to get at a women's locker room. And if you are one of the very, 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 very few that is deeply confused, I have sympathy for you, but you still can't compete with women. It's just not. It's just not right. Like, you deserve respect, but you don't deserve that respect at the cost of someone else's livelihood, and basic rights, right? And so I don't know why this concept's hard to understand, but Democrats can understand it. So the Biden administration just announced a change to Title IX. It would redefine sex so that sex includes, quote, stereotypes, sex characteristics, pregnancy or related conditions, sexual orientation, and gender identity. Like that's why we passed this bill.
Means is men could join sororities. Men could live in dorm rooms with women and could do nothing about it. Men would have full access to bathrooms, changing spaces, anything on campus that were once for women. They could take athletic and academic scholarships away from women. In this new rewrite, it's actually sexual harassment if you misgender someone. But it's not sexual harassment to have someone of the opposite sex parading around your locker room. That's celebrated. But if you misgender someone, you're guilty of committing sexual harassment.
This has just become so nonsensical. It's become like this weird religion. I mean, it's got to be. I mean, it is a political liability for Democrats. They have a few political liabilities that I'm surprised they continue to survive. It's mostly because Republicans like losing, and we screw it up by being unlikable. But that's a whole other problem that I'm trying to deal with on a daily basis.
Absolutely, and I appreciate you trying to deal with it.
Yeah, because I mean, our own side, I'm like, guys, the Democrats are the easiest people in the world to beat. They want males to compete in women's sports. They want males in women's locker rooms. They want an open border. They want to raise your taxes. This is the easiest political party in history to beat, and we managed to screw it up pretty badly with just by putting our worst foot forward at every single turn. Don't get me started on that, but no, but this is nuts. And you know, I remember we voted on this last Congress, and it was I was some other female member of Congress from California, not Katie Porter, but the other younger one who had like a big scandal with like sexual relation in her office, and so she resigned. But I'll never forget what her counter argument to us was on the floor. And it was, you know, because she was a female athlete herself. I can't remember what sport she played, but she said, you know, we don't need you men protecting women's sports. Like, that was her whole thing. I thought they were going to go a totally different direction. I thought they were going to say that whatever bill they were passing didn't actually do what we were claiming it did. You know, that we were misreading the law, which is plausible because it was. I'm forgetting the details, but it was murky. So I thought that's what their argument was going to be, that, no, of course, we're not for men and women's sports. This bill doesn't do that. But that's exactly not what she said. She said they don't need our protection. And over and over and over again, yours is just one case among many. It's pretty clear that there does need to be some legal protection. And it's devastating to women's sports, devastating to women empowerment, to feminism, as I thought we understood feminism. It's devastating to a basic sense of decency and sense of rights and competition, like these. And you've got a whole political party pushing for it. It still blows my mind. One last question for you is, when you were making these speeches, when you go out and you talk, you said 50% of that room in San Francisco was against you, 50% was for you. Did you change minds? Were there people there to listen, you think?
You know, I really do think there were. Outside, let's take away San Francisco, and my answer is 100% yes. I have conversations. Even I went to Cal Berkeley not too long ago, which is, of course, a very liberal school. And I had people who, I walked into that room, the only thing they knew about me was the headlines they see on CNN, which are anti-trans swimmer slams Lia Thomas or something of that nature, which is just of course, nothing of what the message I'm actually conveying or what I actually stand for. And so I have people who come in immediately, they're on defense. But we have a conversation, and afterwards they're like, I agree with you. I'm a part of this community, this LGBTQ community, and I totally understand where you're coming from. So I would say the majority of times I'm able to change perspectives, or at least allow people to hear another side they haven't heard before. So my answer to that is 100% yes.
I hope so. I'm seeing it slowly but surely but it's quiet, but I hear from the gay community quietly all the time, which is like, look, these people are ruining our movement.
Right.
Right. Like, the gay community fought a long time, I think, for equal rights, and understandably so. This has become so deeply irrational that it's hurting the things that are right, whether it's feminism, whether it's gay rights, even transgender rights. I mean, logical transgender rights. Everybody should be treated equal, but not. But again, this is a basic governing philosophy, and I have to end it here because I got a hard out. But this is a basic principle of governing philosophy. You can't give someone a benefit if it costs the rights of someone else. And you can apply it in this case. You can apply it in things like gun control. You can apply it in healthcare. I can give you healthcare, but that comes at the cost of this person who has to provide it and who pays for that. Everything is a cost and benefit, and this is a very clear case. And again, I'll make the last pitch that I always make. This is why conservatism makes more sense, because we ask those very important questions. So, Riley, I got to go, but thank you so much for being a fighter for truth and what is right. And let's talk more. We'd love to keep helping your cause however we can. I'm sure we'll see you on Capitol Hill. I'm assuming at some point. And keep up the good work, and just know that you're fighting for the vast majority of people. So good for you.
Absolutely. Thank you. I appreciate it so much.
I appreciate you.